Welcome, Damien Thibodeaux. It is such a great, I'm so happy and an honor to talk to you. We've known each other.
Like 10, 12 years.
Yes, and it has been a joy to
Ditto. Ditto. Absolutely.
So let's see where this takes us. Look, and we were talking about this before we started taping, you have some inspirational things that people can definitely benefit from. And plus, you've been through quite a bit of challenges through your life, and so we want to hear about that to preserve the history of South Louisiana for generations. No pressure here.
Yeah, thanks, Charlie.
But Damien, thank you, and let's just, let's start. Let's do this chronologically. Let's start at the beginning. Where were you born? That whole event there, and whatever else you want to talk about.
I'm originally from here, Lake Charles, Louisiana, and I have three sisters, one older, two younger sisters. I graduated high school in 1984.
Can you tell me what was life like in Louisiana, in the area, in your neighborhood, growing up as a child? What was?
Okay, so I grew up on a dead-end street. There were families up and down our block, and so all the kids played together, most of us. And I was always the one that liked to create things to do for us. I remember when roller skating became really big, and we had a carport, and a driveway, and my parents would move their cars off the driveway and out of the carport, and all the kids in the neighborhood had bought skates, and I taught them all how to skate. And so we would have lessons. I also did, I think I was 11, and I did a Jerry Lewis backyard carnival to raise money for, because remember he used to have the telethon. Every Labor Day. So I put one together in my backyard. But it was great.
11, that's wonderful.
It was great. We had so much fun. And then another time, I got all the kids in the neighborhood together. We all had wagons, with a handle.
Yes.
My dad was a carpenter, so he had all these pieces of wood and stuff in his shop, and we got pieces of plywood or something, and we set them on top of the wagons, and we built floats. It was just let's have a parade today. And we had I think there was I don't know, we had music. I want to say we had maybe an 8-track player or something.
Gosh, yes.
So before the parade, we went up and down the street, our dead-end road, to let everybody know at this time there's going to be a parade, so be sure to come outside.
You had publicity
so
and everything.
We had 4 or 5 floats. And we just paraded down the street.
That was at the age of 11, somewhere around
there?
there?
Somewhere 10 or 11, something like that, yeah. I even had a lending library because I was a member of the Walt Disney Book Club for kids at that time. So they'd send you a new book every month, and I had a bunch of them, 12 or something. And so I started this lending library.
What a wonderful...
And the kids in the neighborhood...
In your front yard? Or
at the front door there was a little alcove thing, and so I had them all set up on a box or something, so you could see what titles that were available. So I was always doing stuff like that, even as a kid.
That's excellent. That's excellent. So we kind of have an idea of, where the performer in you kind of began, and this idea of presentation and performance and
very early on.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. So that's pretty much a bunch of the childhood. What about high school? Did you continue?
No. And actually, once I got into school and stuff, there was nothing like that really.
Okay.
It was school for me was really a challenge. I was different.
Well, yes, we all are.
I was really different, and maybe a little effeminate or and animated. So got picked on a lot. I got bullied a lot.
Yeah.
So I hated school,
Yes.
the entire thing. And when I got to high school, that's my sophomore year. That's 1981
Yes.
was the first time I kissed a boy.
Oh my goodness.
And for him, it was just because he was curious like I was.
Right.
And that made me develop this god-awful crush on this guy. He was a senior. No, he was a junior in high school. And we were on the debate and speech team together.
Nice.
That's how we knew each other.
Okay.
So I just had this huge crush on him. And then his family moved away. They moved out of state to Tennessee, I believe. So I was crushed. I was really bummed.
During the same year?
Yeah,
During your sophomore year?
my sophomore year. And you know, my parents knew something was wrong, so they sent me to a psychiatrist.
Okay.
And so anyway, I go to her and whatever. Well, all this time, I'm writing letters to my friend that had moved away.
Okay, so you knew an address.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, I had his address and everything. Yeah, so I was writing to him and stuff. Well, the therapy thing was a nightmare. And then, so that went on for a long while. One night, my parents were out. For some reason, I was in their bedroom looking for something. And I happened to look under their mattress on their bed, and I found all the letters I had written to my friend who had moved away.
No.
None of them had been mailed. They had kept them all.
I am floored.
And so was I.
Too.
Yeah, that was devastating. But I don't remember like what happened after that. I don't know.
Okay.
That was the first time I think I ever like did not trust my parents.
Yes.
They were not to be trusted.
Yes.
You know, and it also furthered my feelings already of being different and being alienated from everybody else. You know,
Yes.
so that's probably where that started.
Yes, I would imagine.
Yeah. Also, my sophomore year in high school, I heard the very first Broadway cast recording, and it was a chorus line.
Oh my God. What a way to start Broadway.
Yeah, so
Oh my gosh.
on the speech team, I was with the junior and senior students. I'm a sophomore, and they're talking about this touring company of a chorus line that's coming to Lake Charles. And they're talking about, yeah, you know, and one guy, you know, has seen it already, or maybe even in New York or something, and all this stuff, and they're talking about it. I'm like, well, what is this? What are you talking about? And so they're telling me what it is. Well, I went to the music store after school, and I bought the cast recording of a chorus line. And I went to my sister's house, and her fiance had built these huge speakers. I mean, they were enormous. He did it for like a class or something, you know. So he's like, no, man, you got to listen to it with these speakers. So I put it on, and that music, dun 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 dun, again, step, kick, and I'm listening to it, and then, you know, the horns come in, and boom, 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 and that whole thing, and it just gave me chills, and I sat there and listened to the entire album. And by the end of it, it was like, I just knew,
Got to do this.
I'm going to be in New York.
That was sophomore year.
My sophomore year.
And 16 years old.
15, because
Okay.
I was 17 when I actually graduated.
Got you. Okay.
So 15 years old.
Okay. So 15 years old.
Yeah.
You just started to begin the.
Yeah,
Nice.
that's when it, yeah.
Okay.
The first time it was like a conscious thought of a theater, like,
Nice.
I'm going to New York. Yeah. And then my senior year of high school, 1984, there was some sort of senior event one evening, and my friend Mary was going to ride with me. We were going to go together to this event. And she said, I have ballet class tonight. Pick me up after ballet class at Lady Leah's studio. Okay, sure. So I go, and I'm waiting, and people are coming out, but no Mary. So I go in, and she's in the studio, but she's getting her stuff and everything. I'm like, all right, well, Lady Leah comes over. Of course, you know Lady Leah.
Lady Leah. Yeah.
And she's like, well, when are you going to start taking class? Are you here to take class? I'm like, no, ma'am, I'm just here to pick up Mary, you know, that whole thing.
Yeah, exactly.
And by the end of the conversation, the next day, I was in ballet class.
Oh my God.
Holy cow,
And
yeah.
that's senior year.
Yes.
Okay, so chorus line
Like-
sophomore year, Lady
Yeah.
Leah, and the rest, I guess, was...
Yeah, so, you know, after I heard a chorus line, of course, after that, I started acting on the speech team and competing, and I was winning a lot.
Nice.
I was really. And
That
then
surprised me, yeah.
my duet partner and I won state championships. And then my senior, and so also, you know, every time I could buy a new cast recording of a Broadway musical, I did. And I got up quite a collection. You know, I couldn't get enough. I wanted to hear all of it, everything. And everything was you know, became for me New York. Yeah. New York. Everything was about New York. I'm going to New York. I'm going to New York. That was all I knew.
It stayed strong from sophomore
It did.
all the way to
And as a
senior.
matter of fact, my grandmother, one day I was at my grandma's house. She had this photo in a little frame. It was actually a placemat photo, you know, like at a you get at a souvenir shop of the New York skyline. And I'm like, Grandma, why do you have this? And she's like, oh, so-and-so went to New York, and that's what she brought me back. You want it? And I'm like, yeah, I think I'm gonna take this. So I did, and I put it over my bed in my bedroom.
What a wonderful...
And it was like, every day I was like, I'm going. I'm going.
That's wonderful.
I just knew it, and it was just,
good.
and the more I did it, the stronger this feeling it was. So anyway, so I'm a senior in high school. It's March, maybe later, even April, before graduation. And I'm taking ballet class with Lady Leah. And she keeps telling me what a natural I am, and oh, Damien, do this, show them, Damien. You know, all this stuff, and it was great, but it was also like, sometimes I felt like a party animal, you know, that you tried out, you know, now he's going to do tricks, you know. But they loved it. They were, because it was all natural. I had no technique. So about April, I guess, she comes to me after class. She gives me a pamphlet. She says, Damien, I want you to take this home to your parents, look at it, and talk to your parents about it. This is my friend. He runs a school for the arts in Illinois. I've talked to him about you, and he's willing to take you on a full scholarship. But he has to know in 3 days. And you have to be there in 6 weeks.
Okay, Mom and Dad.
So I went home.
Yes.
Yeah, so
big moment.
It was a huge moment, you know.
Yes.
Because for me, it was like, this is it.
This is what...
This is how I'm gonna do it. It, you know, the road is revealing itself. I'm like, okay, all right. I went home, talked to my parents about it, and my mom was like, absolutely not. You are not going away to do this. You're going to stay here. If you want to go to school, you'll go to McNeese. Meet a girl, get married, settle down, have a family. That's what you do. And it was like, I'm like, no, can't do that. I can't do it.
It was time.
It was.
Where you
It really, there was no way I was staying. Yeah. There was no way. Yeah. And so I remember I used a lot of my money that I got for graduation. You know, everybody gives you money when you graduate. Yeah. So I used that, and I bought a train ticket from New Orleans to Champaign-Urbana, where in Illinois. I got and then eventually, once my mom realized he's really going to do this, Then she came around and she was like, okay,
That's
you know,
so
let's buy you
nice.
some clothes.
Good.
You're going to need some new clothes and this and that, you know. So, so she,
That's great.
you know, she
That's
tolerated it.
Yes.
You know.
Yes, but
So I went to school there. It was really intense.
I mean, you say school. This was specifically a dance school,
Yes.
right? Okay.
Yes.
It wasn't all theater.
We had, there were times for like certain amount of times they would bring in a teacher to do like acting stuff,
Okay.
and with a dance twist to it, you know,
they
like.
have Alexander technique.
Yeah,
right?
yes,
Something like that.
yes,
Has a little bit of,
Alexander, yes,
dance and
yes.
acting and, okay.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
And ballet pantomime, things like that, you know. So we would have that, and even they would also at times have someone come in for some of us to do like voice lessons, voice classes,
So it was
things like
much
that.
more-
So,
yes, okay.
but it was a tiny school. There were 80 students,
Goodness.
and we all 80 students from
That's what I was going to ask.
freshman
Okay.
to postgraduate. And there was like 2 ballet teachers full time and a jazz and a modern teacher. But most of the faculty came from New York, Europe, different parts of Europe.
The students, same thing? Were they all over the international?
They were. They
okay.
were.
Oh.
And there was also a music school, I forgot. Yeah,
Nice.
so dance
So
and
they chose
music.
the-
Yeah, because a lot of their music students were from Brazil, actually. So so that component also.
Okay.
So we were exposed to a lot of different. We were
really-
dancing 8 hours a day, sometimes 10, you know, or more. It just so I go
pretty
through the
intense.
whole thing, and it was intense. As a matter of fact, oh my gosh, I'll tell you this quick story. Our days started with ballet technique.
Okay.
There were 3 levels: level 1, 2, and 3. 3 being the most advanced level. I was in actually I was in level 1, but I didn't know that the studio I was in was level 2. Okay.
Okay.
And listen, I don't know anybody there. I'm first time away from home, very far away from home, doing something I have completely new to me. So I'm in this ballet class, and I have to watch the people in front of me at the bar because I have no idea what to do. So this one girl stood in front of me every day, right? And her name was Shani, and she and I became great friends. And she's now a neurosurgeon, a pediatric
goodness.
neurosurgeon. Yeah, isn't that crazy? But anyway,
That's wonderful. Though.
so one day after, oh my God, so this is going on, and it's so, all of it is just so over my head. And I would go back to my dorm room every night and cry, just cry and cry until I fell asleep, really. And so then one day, after a couple of weeks, our teacher, Francesca Corkle from the Joffrey Ballet, I remember, because her hairline started right here. From all those years of pulling her hair back in a bun, her hairline was like way back here. She's like, oh, so I've been told I'm supposed to call Roe every day before class. And we
2 weeks
never
in.
had, yeah, 2 weeks in. So she's like, so that's what we're going to do. So she starts calling Roe, calls everybody's name. And then she says, is there anybody here whose name I didn't call? So I'm like, I raised my hand. She's like, oh, honey, what's your name? Ken Thibodeaux. And she's looking and turns the page. Oh, baby, you're supposed to be in level 1 across the hall. I was like, first of all, I was so embarrassed.
Yes.
So I go, I'm like, okay. And then, you know, she carries on, whatever. She doesn't think twice about it.
Right.
The girl in front of me turns around, and I'm getting my stuff together. She turns around, she says, don't you dare move.
Oh my God.
And I'm like, what? She's like, stay right where you are. And then she turned around, you know, and Miss Corkle just went on with class. She didn't care. So I stayed there, and Francesca Corkle didn't care. I don't think she ever called roll again, but that had to have been the only way I was able to stay there, you know.
Yes.
So I stayed, and then 2 weeks or so of this, ballet, 8 hours a day. I remember this so vividly in class, and we're at the bar and we're doing an exercise, and I was looking at myself in the mirror right there in front of, on the other side of Shaney, looking at my arm, and then I realized I wasn't watching Shaney's feet. And then I looked down at my feet, and I'm doing exactly what she said to do. And it was like, oh my God, it's in. It's happening. It's working. Yeah. So that was great. Yeah. So after the first year and a half, I was graduating. And so during this time, like I said, the school was connected with many different ballet companies all over the planet. And so at graduation, they would have these representatives from all these different dance companies coming. And, here are our students. Do you want to hire anybody? Do you want to offer anybody a job, kind of thing, an apprenticeship? That's how you do that in ballet. So we're getting ready, and they cast the graduation performance, and I didn't have any ballet roles. And I was really crushed, and I'm like, what's the deal? And they're like, well, you're not really going to be a ballet dancer. So we thought that we would find a good jazz company for you. I was, okay, what do you got in mind? And they're like, oh, there's a company in New York called the American Dance Machine. And they do a lot of stuff. We think you would be absolutely perfect for them.
New York.
We have, and so the president of the school chimes in, and she's like, I have a friend who lives in New York, and he and his partner have agreed to let you stay with them while you're there working with the company. So I'm like,
wonderful.
Okay, great. So I get it all together, fly to New York. Well, so my flight to New York, I was supposed to get into New York at like 7 or 8 in the evening. I think there was a storm, or there was some delay. I didn't get to New York, into the city, until 11, 12 o'clock at night. So I found my way. Okay, this is the first time I've ever been in New York City. I found my way to their apartment. I have no idea how. And of course, I've got this huge suitcase, I find the apartment. They live down on 9th Street in the Village.
Okay.
And of course, he opens the door, and he's like, who the fuck are you? What the hell? And I tell them who they are, and they're like, what? You were supposed to be here hours ago. We thought you weren't coming. And so I get inside. So, well, they get on the phone with the president of the school that sent me to them, right?
Yes.
And they lay into her. I mean, oh my gosh. So then everybody calms down, and they're like, sorry. It's just we were told this, this, and this, and now it's this, this, and this, and we didn't know, and you caught us off guard, kind of thing. No problem. They were an older couple, actually. Buzz Miller, who was the friend of the president from my school, he was he was a retired Broadway hoofer. He was a dancer, a Broadway dancer.
Right.
He was actually in the movie. It was a Marilyn Monroe movie. He did a movie with Marilyn Monroe, a dance number, like a whole thing, and they became really good friends.
Oh my goodness.
So it was him and his partner was a historian. He was very smart,
Wonderful. Yes.
Anyway, so I'm there, and Buzz is associated or affiliated with the American Dance Machine, this company that I'm supposed to be going to. So I go and take classes with the company with Buzz.
Okay.
And these classes are fantastic.
Nice.
I'm used to a ballet class with a pianist playing the piano, accompanying it and everything.
Yes.
American Dance Machine class had a drum set and bongos.
Ooh, that's so good.
And that's what we were moving to. That was like, wow, this is amazing.
Yes.
So I loved it. And the director of American Dance Machine, Lee Theodore, was in the original cast of West Side Story. She played anybody. So she did a lot of West Side Story stuff, and Jerome Robbins stuff.
Yes.
And I remember like this whole 20-minute part of the class was all this West Side Story stuff and just these walking across the floor and just, it was so, I loved it. I loved being here, being there and stuff, and I wanted to impress them so much, please hire me. And then, so we're doing this for a couple of weeks, and then she announces that she's moving to LA, and she's going to move the company to LA.
What?
And blah, 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 and I'm like, I'm not going to LA. I just got to here. I want to be in New York. And about a week later, they were gone,
Yes.
So I was taking classes. There were a couple of teachers that I'd taken with at the school in Illinois that were from New York.
Okay.
So I looked them up when I was there, and I was taking classes with some of them. And well, the guy, Buzz and his partner was kind of getting tired of having me there.
Yeah.
And they were like pretty much ready to tell me to leave,
Yes.
So they're like, well, what do you plan to do? I'm like, I don't know, get a job, and how does one go about getting an apartment? And, well, you could do this or that, and everything they were suggesting were things like I was going to have to like do things, favors or something, in order to be able to survive or maybe, I don't know, it was just weird. It was it was just weird.
Yeah.
So then one day they're like, hey, we have a friend that's coming over. He lives in Newport, Rhode Island, and he wants to meet you.
Okay.
And we've told him about you and blah, blah, blah. So this guy comes over, he's an older gentleman. He was very nice and everything, and he was a painter.
Okay.
And lives in Newport, whatever. And so he wants to take me to see a Broadway show. So I'm like, yeah, sure.
Okay.
So we go and see Big River. Had just won the Tony.
Wow.
And I'd seen it on TV, and it's like that scene with the raft as they're singing that song, and it drifts across the stage like they're on water.
Yes.
I wanted to see that live. So we went and saw it. I loved it. Oh my gosh, it was amazing. It was so fabulous. So then, so he leaves after the weekend. He goes back to Newport, and they're like, so did you like him? I'm like, yeah, he was a nice man. I had a great time. Like, great, because he would like you to, if you'd like, you could move to Newport, and he'll be your daddy, kind of thing. I'm like, okay, I don't know if I really want to do that. For whatever reason, I somehow ended up in Newport at this man's house.
Okay.
I was terrified because that's all I was thinking. And I don't even remember like why I actually went. Yes, I do. Because Buzz and his partner, whose name Alan, Buzz and Alan, were like, either go to Newport or get out, or you're on the street, kind of thing. So I went to Newport, and now I remember. I went to Newport.
Newport to New York?
It was like a 3-4 hour
Okay.
train ride or something. I think. Yeah, it wasn't that far at all. He had this huge mansion, and I mean, he was a nice man, but he was like this older guy, and so I'm like, I do want to get back to New York. I don't want to be here. I want to be in New York. Well, eventually I found a couple of friends of mine from the school in Illinois that were also in New York. So the three of us, they were in basically a hotel room. They had a room, and they let me stay there for a little while. So I'm trying to figure out what the hell I'm going to do. somewhere during all of that, oh no. So shortly after that, my friend and I that I hooked up with, we go and audition for the Alvin Ailey School.
Wow.
And we both got full scholarships at Alvin Ailey. So we're doing that. And then we lose the hotel room we had. They kicked us out. They realized what was going on. They kicked us out.
Yeah.
So another friend of mine from the school was living in a building in the West Village. I remember that. It was a house for women, like a boarding house for women.
Okay.
So men could be in the lobby and visit, but you couldn't go upstairs to the rooms.
Yeah.
Well, we would hide my suitcase in her lobby.
Okay.
And in the mornings, and she would come out. There was a breakfast place in the building. You know, they had meals and stuff, and she would come out with like a banana and those little packs of cereal, you know, stuff like that, and she'd give them to me. And we would walk to Midtown. She had a job in Midtown, and at that time, that's where the Alvin Ailey School was. It was in Midtown, and she would go this way. I would go to Times Square, and so I would sleep outside her building.
How you slept outside?
Yeah.
How long?
Yeah.
Did this last?
It wasn't a long, it was just a few days.
Okay.
It was just a few days. And I remember, oh my gosh, and like it was turning fall.
Right.
And I remember the night, like the temperature dropped like 20 degrees.
Yes.
You know, it was like, oh my God.
Yes.
Anyway, so a couple of days of this, and I remember Christy went to work. We're in Midtown. I'm heading down to Alvin Ailey. And I'm passing a payphone. Remember payphones?
Right.
They had
Oh,
them on
yeah.
the sidewalks,
Yes.
right? And I picked up the payphone at the corner, and I called my mom. And it was so, I remember it feeling, it was just so spontaneous.
Yeah.
I called my mom, and of course she answered, you know, what's wrong?
Yes. Yes.
I'm like, Mom, I think I need to come home. So she was thrilled,
Yes.
you know. So
Yes.
she set up a plane ticket for me.
Nice.
I went back to my friend's building, got my suitcase, somehow got myself to the airport,
Okay.
flew home, flew back to Lake Charles. And I was 19 years old by this
There we
point.
go. Okay.
So it was 2 years after graduation.
Yes. Okay.
1986, I'm teaching dance classes for Karen Ogden in Sulphur.
Nice. Okay.
And one evening, we're finishing class, and we're doing a stretch, and we're leaning over our legs. And when I leaned over my leg, I started getting really dizzy, like I got this head rush. So I picked my head up, and it was just getting worse and worse and worse, and then I had to sit down, and they're like, oh my
pain,
gosh,
just
what's wrong?
dizzy?
Yeah, no pain, just
Okay.
like
Just very.
really dizzy.
Yeah.
And so they sat me down. Here's a Sprite. Drink a Sprite. Maybe it's it's your stomach. You know, if your stomach is upset or
True.
something,
Yes, yeah.
drink a Sprite. Did that. Still like it was crazy. So they're like, "Can you drive home?"
Right.
So after a while, we waited, and it settled down enough. And
where
I'm
you
like,
felt comfortable.
I think I can drive home. And one of the other teachers was like, I'm going to follow you.
Good.
So she did. She followed me home. I got home, and I was telling my mom, what was going on and stuff. So I laid down. I went to bed. A while later, sometime during the night, I started vomiting and just really nauseous and the spinning again. It was,
Right, start all over
all
again.
intense. And then, so the next morning, I was fine. So my mom and I started calling doctors. Well, she did. She started calling doctors. And we started going to see doctors.
Right.
And they're asking me all these questions, and they're doing all these tests and looking at everything, and it's like, I don't know.
Right.
They couldn't figure it out. And like 2 or 3 different doctors. Okay. And it's like, I don't know. Are you addicted to drugs? That was the last one.
Yeah.
That was the last one.
Okay.
It's like,
All right.
okay, you have no idea what's going on, right? So then it's like, fine. Well, then a few days later, I'm at home. It happens again. The dizziness and
It just
the
started, you were
nausea.
stretching or
Yeah,
anything, and you weren't
nothing
doing
at all. I was just at home doing I don't whatever.
Okay.
And it just came over me again. So now my mom is really freaking out.
Yes.
So she remembers. She's like, "Hey, I know this guy a technician that works at it was a CAT scan place on Lake Street.
Okay.
Had just like CAT scan was like a new thing,
Yes.
you know."
Yeah, exactly.
She's like, "Let me call him." So she did. He was like, "Yeah, I can see him at this time." So we went over there. They did a CAT scan
Okay. Of your body?
of my head. Yeah, my whole body.
Okay.
My whole body.
Okay.
And so I come out of that, and the look on my mother's face. I'm like, "What?" She says, "You have a brain tumor. It's the size of a golf ball. You have to be admitted into the hospital immediately." Telling me. So we go to my aunt's house, who lived near wherever we were,
Okay.
and my mom's on the phone,
Yeah.
and she's getting hysterical, and she's making arrangements and and everything, and I'm just sitting there, and I'm like, okay,
yeah.
I don't know how to process this,
Exactly,
you
yeah,
know.
yeah.
House, and she called my dad.
Gotcha.
There were no cell phones,
Gotcha. Yes, of
my
course.
dad, she's calling her mom, and
Okay.
and the hospital, and making arrangements and all
Okay,
this
gotcha.
stuff.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, I see.
So I go into the hospital, and they're like, "Well, yeah, there's this tumor, and because of the way it's positioned right now, and it's pressing against nerves and stuff, and that's why you're starting to have these episodes, and we have to remove it. The only thing we can do is remove it before it bursts."
19 years old.
I'm 19. They're like, "But we have to wait. So first we have to put you on this IV drip to get the swelling. Your brain has so swollen because of the pressure. If we open you up right now, you will just explode."
Yes.
So we had to wait 3 days. So we did that, and then they come back. They're like, "Okay, so look, we're just gonna let you know." And by this point, I had 3 doctors. 2 of them were local, and 1 was from Houston.
Okay.
So they were all working on my case. My case.
Right.
They come in the night before the surgery, and they're like, "We're just going to tell you,
Yeah.
the best we are hoping for is that you will survive, but you're going to be a vegetable. You're going to be in the bed for the rest of your life." That's
That's what you were told the night before the surgery.
night before the surgery. This is the most we're hoping for. This is the best we're hoping for. You're going to live, but you're going to be bedridden for the rest of your life. I don't know. I think I was in shock.
Okay, yeah.
Probably.
Yeah.
My mother was hysterical.
Yes.
So the surgery goes on. The next thing I remember, I was screaming, and I was screaming so loud it woke me up. I was in intensive care after the surgery.
Okay.
And when I opened my eyes, I was looking at the floor in the room. And I mean, I couldn't move my head, but I could feel the bed was on the ceiling.
Okay.
And it was freaking me out so much.
Yes.
I was screaming.
Yes.
And then the nurses run, and I can see them on the ground, and they're running in, and that kind of thing.
Yes.
Get that, all that stuff, and then I was out. I don't know. The next time I woke up, my bed was attached to the wall. So I was looking at everything sideways.
Yes.
Sideways.
And did you ever discover why? I mean, something in your did the doctors
Yes.
ever explain this?
Yes. My equilibrium after the surgery, or as a result of it, it was turned completely upside down, totally flipped. So it was in the process of writing
Correcting
itself
itself.
back.
Yes.
Yes, because I remember the next time I woke up, I was on the ground, and I remember looking up at the ceiling and seeing everything around me and being so grateful. Yes, like I can relax now, kind of thing. Yeah.
That makes sense. But obviously, when you woke up, were you able to understand what you were seeing? Were you able to speak? Were you able to?
No.
Okay.
No, I don't remember speaking. I don't even remember I don't remember speaking. I remember screaming.
Okay. Even whenever your brain had gotten to the point where you were in the bed and it was on the floor and everything, you still remember screaming.
It was all like a dream.
Okay.
It didn't feel real.
Okay.
You know, well, we're talking about a lot of morphine.
Yeah.
You know,
yes.
So.
Yes. Yes.
And then, you know, so then it got to a point where I was stable enough to be moved to a private room. Okay. But they didn't have anything. The only room they had available in the whole hospital was in pediatrics.
Oh, goodness.
And, you know, we're like, okay. Who cares?
Yes.
So I was in pediatrics, and I remember,
that's so good.
And the only other thing I really remember, like I remember being in that room, looking at something, like, or seeing something on TV with words,
okay.
And I was like putting the words together, like how to pronounce, you know what I mean? Like in my brain trying to process.
Right.
And I was in the pediatric ward, and there was a little playroom across the hall, and my mom would bring me a magazine or something, or a children's books, and I would just, you know, was able to like just look at the words, and it slowly started coming back.
That probably made a difference to give you something to work your brain from the moment you were able to. I'm imagining that in some way helped.
I would think so too.
So, how long? Okay, so how long did all of this?
Well, that was about a month
Okay.
of recovery in the hospital.
Okay.
So, and once I had survived, and my doctors were like, "Oh my gosh, you did it!
Yes.
We did it! It worked!" You know. But they're like, "Hey, look, okay, so because of the location of the tumor and the way we had to go in, we had to remove part of your skull and the back of your head, and we couldn't put it back, because if we put it back in, you wouldn't be able to move your neck." You know, or look up and down or side to side. So they pulled the muscle from my neck over and literally stapled it in place. They're like, so it's going to take a good long while for it to get hard enough back there for you that it can protect you. So you can't play sports. You can't do any physical activity that would jeopardize you getting hit in the head or falling and hitting your head.
So for a dancer.
So for a dancer who's still like becoming a dancer, oh my gosh, you know, at that time the Alvin Ailey studios were right across the street from the Schubert Alley. A chorus line marquee was right in the window of my second period jazz class. How's that for inspiration?
Yes.
So,
that's
so they're like, forget dancing, forget it.
Right.
So I was really out of sorts. I eventually rehabilitated myself, got myself moving. Well, my sister told me recently, she was talking about, I had forgotten, she was talking about, she's like, yeah, I remember when you were in the hospital, and after your surgery, like 3 days or something after your surgery, and I'd gone to visit you after work, and you weren't in your room. And I'm like, oh, and she said I got off the elevator and I looked down the hall, and you're standing in the hallway at the rail, holding onto the rail of the wall, doing a ballet bar.
She said that?
She said that. I'm like, I was? She's like, oh yeah, you were. She's like, yeah. It's like you couldn't wait.
Like
no, she's like, you couldn't wait to get out of that bed.
I'm not surprised.
Yeah, so apparently, yeah. And then I got to a point, so then I went home. It took about a month in the hospital before I was released.
I was at 19. Were you 20 yet whenever you finished, or do you remember? It's still 19 years old.
I think I was still 19.
When all of this, okay.
Yeah. And so this was in the late summer, maybe fall.
Of 86, 87.
Yeah.
Okay.
In the spring, 6 or 7 months later,
Gotcha.
Mark Petaway was doing a production of A Chorus Line at Axe. That became my goal. And so I did. I went back to class with Lady Leah, and I, was really trying to get myself going again. Auditioned for the show. Got a part in the show. And I remember opening night, in that production, that whole thing was a big deal here. And opening night, there was a party, and one of my doctors, one of my neurologists was there, neurologist. He was there, and he was like, he came up to me and he grabbed me. He was like, "Are you all right?" And he's like looking at me, like, everything, and I'm like, I'm great. I feel great. I'm fine. He was like, and he looked at me. He was like, "You're not supposed to be able to do that." And like looking.
Right.
And,
Yes.
like he was really like,
that happened? Yes.
how the hell,
That.
Yeah.
That right there will tell you that the human body and the human mind are.
Yes, absolutely. You're absolutely
There's no.
right.
There's no limit.
I had a dream, and there was nothing that was going to stop me. So I eventually, I was able to work again, and then so I started waiting tables and making a buttload of money, and just socking it away. I was very good at it, and so doing that, dancing as much as I could, and then a friend of mine called me. A friend from high school had an uncle who was stage manager at a professional theater in Massachusetts, Beverly, Massachusetts, and they had a whole summer season, and they hired college-age kids to come in and intern, and do all the front work, and stuff. And you earn a little bit of money. They put you in somebody's house. You get a room in somebody's house. Yep. And she's like, "Do you want to go?" I'm like, "Hell yeah, let's do it." So we did. I did that for a summer in Massachusetts, and a friend of mine that I knew from Lafayette. So he was teaching. He was getting his MFA in acting at the University of Connecticut. And he also taught acting classes to undergraduates. Right. Yes. And he was like, "You should come up here and take my undergrad classes." Because I told him, I'm making my way back to New York. I want to do this and So he was like, "Well, you should come here." I'm like, "Okay, I have to get tuition and all that." I'm like, "I can't do that." He was like, "No, they don't have to know. You don't have to tell anybody." So I'm like, "Okay." So I went to Connecticut and stayed in his apartment with his 2 other roommates, and was taking acting classes with him. Did a couple of productions at the university. It was great. That's where I learned about auditioning for summer stock.
Yes.
So I went and did that, and I actually got jobs, paying jobs doing theater. So I was, yay. And then that led me to Boston.
Wow, okay.
And I was in Boston for about 3 years. Yep. And I did theater in Boston, and I wasn't dancing. I had stopped dancing just for whatever reason. Well, I was focusing on, my acting stuff, right?
Sure. Yeah.
But when I got to Boston, I wanted to start taking ballet classes again. Okay. Because I'm a ballet dancer, and we like to do that sort of thing. Yeah. So I started studying with this guy, Jose Mateo. And a few months later, he approached me after class. He's like, "I'm starting a ballet company, and I'd like to hire you to be one of my dancers.
What
So-
a huge recommendation.
Yeah, and it was like, and it pays this much, which was really compatible
Make a living.
to what I was earning working at a day job.
God, yes.
You know, it actually was a little more, I think. So I'm like, yeah, sure. So I did, and it really was being in a dance company from the ground up, you know, because we played, you know, like receptions and things like that, and, you know,
Yes.
wherever we could and stuff. And then eventually he was able to get the Majestic Theater in Boston to do a production of The Nutcracker.
Oh my goodness.
So I got to do that. I wrote a play.
A play or a musical?
A play.
Okay.
I wrote a one-man play called Tutu. And
Damien, that's
it was about this kid who was from a small town, and he gets in a fight with his dad, and his dad he gets hit. His dad pushes him or something, and he falls and he knocks himself out. He knocks him out.
Yeah.
So it's this. The play is actually this what goes through his subconscious mind while he's unconscious.
Interesting.
Yeah, and it's all about coming into his own and standing up for himself. And you know, the end of it, he has this confrontation with his dad, and everything is healed. And then the Sugar Plum Fairy comes out, and she's got this huge tutu. Huge white tutu, and he fits into it, and he's wearing point shoes, and he does this whole dance on point in this tutu, bare chested too. I was also
Yes.
Just this whole triumphant thing, and it was actually featured in a theater festival in Boston. The guy that I was seeing at the time was also an actor, and he had hooked up with some people in New York. So he was doing a cabaret show in New York, on weekends kind of thing. So he met someone in New York who was involved with an off-Broadway show. And in the show, there's this scene where a drag queen shows up. A drag queen shows up and does this whole skit thing. And the actor they had playing that part at the time did Judy Garland. But my boyfriend was doing a cabaret act as Lauren Bacall. And the producers of this show had seen it, and this guy that did Judy, who was in the show, was going on vacation. And they needed someone to cover that part. So he stepped in. So he had all that going on, and then and then they offered him the understudy job of the show.
Yes.
So he had to be in New York like in 2 weeks.
Okay.
While I was doing my show, my play in Boston, and so I was like, okay, you go to New York now, get going, and find us an apartment. I'll be there after my show closes. I'll pack us up and get us. And so I did, and that's how I got to New York the second time.
Nice.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, finally. So when I was in New York, I was temping and taking classes, just trying to get my bearings, get my feet,
You gotta keep,
know,
gotta keep it, right.
and learning about living in New York and all that. And so, and then I saw an ad for an audition for the Ballet Trocadero. The Ballet Trocadero, and the only thing I knew about the Ballet Trocadero was because I had just recently met a guy who was in the original cast company of this dance company, the Ballet Trocadero de Monte Carlo.
Okay.
And I knew and he had told me how the company started and all this stuff. It started in the East Village in the 70s.
Okay.
This group of guys, they were all dancers. And they would get together on the weekends and get drunk and, probably stoned and whatever, it's the 70s.
Yes.
And they would dress in ballet drag. And they would dance like these ballet things,
yes.
in drag as ballerinas. And then it became a show, you know, and then it became the Ballet Trocadero de Monte Carlo. So I had met Sean, you know, a few months before. So when I saw this, I recognized the name and I knew what it was. So I was like, hey, I had just done my little one-man show, and which ends with me doing a ballet dance on point. Okay, because one of the things about this company was you had to be willing to dance on point.
Yeah. Okay.
So I went and auditioned, and I had my shoes. You know, at the end, it was basically a ballet class, and then at the end of the class, they had us put point shoes on and just do something. Well, I put my point shoes on, and I already had a whole dance, you know, and so they were like, "Oh wow!" So I got the job, and I remember walking back home after all that, and I was coming up to the St. Malachi Chapel, the Actors Chapel. I went in there, I got on my knees, and I thanked God. I just thanked God and just wept, you know, like, it's only because of you. It can only be because there is something greater than me at work here, you know.
That is wonderful.
So I joined the Ballet Trocadero, and our first tour was a month in Russia.
Come on.
We did a 2.5-hour dance concert. Okay, so there were many different dances. You know, yeah.
Okay.
There were only 16 of us, so
Talk about a lot.
everybody, you know.
Yeah.
You had to be in a certain place. Everybody had to do a certain job to make it all
machine,
work.
yes,
Yes.
yeah.
Nope, we couldn't lose anybody,
Right.
you know. So we're doing that, and for about a month we rehearsed in New York. We were rehearsing in New York at 890 Broadway. Now, okay, go back to chorus line.
Okay.
And I'm going to be on the chorus line, Michael Bennett. Michael Bennett, after he did chorus line, bought the building that is now 890 Broadway. And it is now it's a rehearsal space for Broadway shows. And people can rent it out, also rooms for auditions and stuff.
Yes.
So
Oh my.
that's where we're rehearsing, okay? And it was just another one of those,
yes.
I'm right where I'm
Little
supposed to
piece
be.
and, yes. It's
Yeah.
all-
So we rehearsed for a month, go to Russia. Oh my gosh! It's the month of March, which is apparently the dead of winter in Russia.
Oh, that's yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Yes.
We get to JFK Airport. We're flying Aeroflot, which is a Russian airline. Okay. The outside of the plane is painted brown and red. You go in, there are no reserved seats. First come, first serve. So everybody's running into the plane.
Exactly. Yeah.
The seats are all folded down on the floor. So you find your seat and you pull it up and open it. So we're on our way to Moscow.
Okay.
They serve dinner.
Okay.
It comes in they have a little plastic container
No.
with oh my God, a slab of Spam and another little small container of water.
And that's dinner.
And that's dinner. So we get, so we're in Russia, and we're playing in Moscow the first week, and that started and everything. Well, one of the other dancers that had been hired when I was hired, he was dancing a couple of the male roles in a couple of the ballets we were doing. So he was having to partner one of the other guys as the ballerina.
Okay.
Well, he decided while we're in Russia, he no longer wants to do any parts on point in point shoes. He only wants to do boy parts. So he gets into this huge argument with the artistic director of the company. And it's like, you were hired knowing you had to do both.
Exactly.
And he was like, yeah, but I changed my mind, or whatever. You know what? You're fired. Go home. So they send him back to the States. Well, like I said, there are only like 16 of us in the whole company, and we do a full-length evening of ballet.
Right.
And so the casting, one person out, that means 4 or 5 other people have to be moved around. And as it happened, I was the only one available to dance the Dying Swan at the end of the second act. And that, the Dying Swan is a Trocadero signature, you know, so it's a big deal.
Yeah.
So I had to learn it in 2 days. I learned the piece, and so then we traveled to Vilna, Lithuania,
Yes.
and we're playing the opera house. And it's like a state-owned opera house, so it's enormous, and it's very, you know, probably from the Baroque era of something.
Yes.
So it's gorgeous, and it's a raked stage, as most stages in Europe are.
Yeah.
And so we start the show. It's sold out. So there are over 2,000 people in this place. And in those old opera houses in Europe, the floors were wood. You know, it's all made of wood. And so when the audience likes something happening on stage, when they really like it, they stomp their feet on the wood floors. So it creates this vibrating thing through the whole building.
Do you feel it on the stage?
Oh God, yes.
Oh,
oh my God, you feel it in your body. I'm not kidding. It's
yes. Yes.
And so music starts, and I start across the stage, and everything's going fine, feathers are falling. I get through the whole thing. The curtain closes, and in the piece, there are 3 curtain calls, and they're staged, and you know, so it's supposed to be 3 curtain calls.
Right.
So curtain opens, I go out for my first curtain call, and the sound, I can hear it right now.
Oh
I can hear it. It was deafening. It was deafening, and you're looking out, and you know, that far downstage, you can see into the house. Yeah. So and it's all of this, like all of that, and there's the stomping and applauding, and it was like something snapped in me, something moved in me, shifted right in that moment, and I knew, I'm like, I am where I'm supposed to be. I am where I'm supposed to be. And so I started getting cast in that role more and more.
Nice.
And then eventually the guy that I was like, the other guy that was like the superstar dancer of that piece, he left the company.
Okay.
And so they just put me right into his place. So if I couldn't do it, then there were like 2 or 3 other people who could go on for me, kind of thing. So, but it became my thing, and of course over time I really was able to perfect it, you know, and create. It was really a great lesson. The piece itself, it's very quiet, and the whole idea is this swan is coming out and she's gonna die. Okay, so she's out on this pond, right? And so you're like on your tippy toes, you know, just bereting across the stage the whole time. The entire piece is 3.5 minutes, and you're on your toes for most of that until she falls to the floor.
Right. Yes.
Kind of thing. So yeah, and then there, you know, she'll go to one side of the stage, and then there's this beautiful little fluttering thing, and then she, you know, goes to the other side of the stage and all that, and then the death thing comes at her, and she tries to get away, and anyway, so and then she ends in the famous pose, you know, where she's over her legs this way, and then she reaches up, and her arms reach back, and in a back bend, you know, the last note kind of thing. Yeah. So anyway, so that became my thing, and it was a great lesson too. Well, of course, you know, anytime as an actor, as a dancer, a performer, you are doing a show, or you're doing something repetitively, like a lot of performances.
Right. Yes.
You know,
yes.
you learn how to make it fresh every time.
Yes.
And so as a performer how vital that is. I learned a lot about that, doing that particular dance piece. And it became a real lesson in being in the moment.
Yes.
And I can only recall really like 2 definite moments doing that piece where because I knew I was in that moment, something happened, and it was just like, yeah,
Glorious.
Kind of thing.
Yes.
So I experienced that doing that piece. But anyway, so I got to do that. So I was doing that, and then there's a organization in New York, Broadway, Equity Fights AIDS.
Yeah.
And they do a fundraiser every spring, the Easter bonnet competition.
Okay.
And every Broadway show on stage that at that time enters an Easter bonnet with their show's theme. It's something of their show.
Yes.
And they are these huge, elaborate, lights and flashing. The sky's the limit. They
Major
really,
bonnets.
and each company that presents a bonnet does a little 10-minute skit to introduce the bonnet into the competition. So they put together a quick little skit thing. And that year, Glenn Close was doing Sunset Boulevard. So anyway, so this particular year, Actors Equity decided to include the dance community in the Easter bonnet competition. So they selected the Ballet Trocadero to represent that portion of the show.
Yes.
Well, there was another dancer who was a veteran in the company.
Okay.
So he'd been there a long time, and he did Dying Swan sometimes too. He traveled with us. He did mostly costumes, I think. But he could dance whenever he wanted to, that kind of thing.
Yes.
So he was doing it. He was going to be doing it for representing Trox.
Okay.
Well, about a week or so before the show, he comes to me and was like, "Hey, I decided I don't want to do that Broadway thing. Would you want to do it?" So I was like, "Play it cool, Damien. Play it cool. Play it cool."
Yes. Don't let your audience.
I'm like, "Yeah, sure, okay." So oh my gosh. So he built this headpiece. He built it. It was this. Oh my gosh! He took a milk carton and cut it in half, and the bottom half flipped upside down. That was a headpiece, and he foamed the inside and around it and all that. And then on that, he put a chandelier upside down. Had a whole chandelier. Yeah, and he painted it. I don't remember what color it was, but and then from all of the points on the chandelier, he had these little dolls that he made into different dance legendary people. So there was like Martha Graham on one with a big wig, thing on her head, and Merce Cunningham, that kind of thing. And I did the Dying Swan. I danced the Dying Swan with this thing on my head. So, and it was amazing. It was amazing. It was at the Palace Theater that year.
Hello, yes.
Beauty and the Beast was on Broadway,
Okay.
doing in that house at that time, and all the sets, the whole set was amazing.
Right.
But there were fly pieces that came in and out, but they were on tracks.
Okay.
So there were grooves into the stage, all over the stage, where they would like come in. Yeah. So and I'm on point, and I've got to maneuver myself around all of this stuff. So and then there were other things I had to alter in the piece because I had this chandelier on my head. I couldn't put my head down at all.
Yes.
So I had to change the whole thing. And it went great. And, there were 2 performances.
Nice.
Mostly it was, the audience consisted of the Broadway community.
Okay.
So everybody who was anybody in the Broadway community was either on stage or in the audience.
Yes.
I shared a dressing room with Liliane Montevecchi, who's a really famous French star. She's a big musical theater star in France. I thought she was there for Grand Hotel, but Grand Hotel was way before.
That's true, yeah.
So I'm not sure why she was there or what she was doing on Broadway that year, but whatever.
Okay.
So she's in the dressing room. Oh, and we shared Dying Swan stories because she was a dancer also, and she had done ballet.
Yes.
And actually, she played the ballerina in Grand Hotel.
That's wonderful.
But yeah, so we shared Dying Swan stories.
So
oh my
nice.
God,
Yes.
you know, and I'm in full makeup and everything backstage, and Jerry Lewis is walking by, and he just kind of looked at me. Yeah, yep,
yes.
Jerry Lewis.
Okay.
And he looked, and he stopped, and he looked at me, and he was like, "You look familiar," or something like that, you know, something about, and he alluded to like his days when he did drag. You know, so of course it was hilarious. And I told him when I was a kid I had a backyard carnival, and I made $13 for him. And he thanked me for that. He's like, "Thank you." Yeah. You know, and Marlo Thomas.
Oh my God.
You know, oh my gosh, that was wonderful kind of thing. Well, so I go out on stage and I get through it and everything, and it was amazing again, as you can imagine. And I come off stage, and Whoopi Goldberg and Glenn Close are standing in the wings. And I'm walking up, and Whoopi Goldberg is like, "Girl, that was great. Oh my!" And Glenn Close just looking like, "Yeah, yeah." I'm like, "Oh my gosh, wow!"
And that's how you
So-
got to Broadway.
And that's how I got to Broadway. And the first time, you know, like a year later, I was in London in the West End there.
That's
and
their Broadway, yes.
their Broadway, right. And the London Times, this is the only thing I remember, like as far as press goes. The London Times said my Dying Swan was the funniest 3 minutes in recorded ballet history. And I just love that. To be told,
Much of an impact, yes.
you will never walk
No way,
again.
Exactly, you'll never do that again.
I think being told, you know, at 19 that if you survive this, you'll be in bed for the rest of your life. You'll be a vegetable. And I think that's what, I don't know, that drove me, absolutely. That was the driving force behind all of it. And 12, 13 other countries around the world. Yeah, because I remember one time, somewhere in all of there, you know, I was thinking about it. I'm like, God, you know, I didn't want just 2 days, two performances on Broadway. I wanted like a career. And you know, he was like, "Yes, but I also gave you the world."
Yes.
And I was like, "Yeah, you did. You did. I've seen the world." It's like, "Yeah, you did. Okay, never mind. Thanks."